All right, so we made the decision to divide the estimating biological sex into two parts. First part was the skull. Second part is the pelvis. And for the pelvis, we'll talk about the entirety of the pelvic girdle, both pelvis bones, or more accurately, the os coxa. And also I'll talk a little bit about the sacrum. So again, I will not talk about every characteristic, but a lot of the major ones that we pay attention to. So I have both left side of the pelvis for a male and a female. On your right is the male, on your left is the female. And I will also, we have a full pelvis of a male and female that I will show as well. Okay, so with adults, the possibility to estimate biological sex is pretty high, and the change between the pelvic girdle of a male and female is associated with hormonal changes that happen during puberty. But again, it's not 100%, but usually we can be pretty accurate. Okay. So first, I'm going to talk about a characteristic that is one that is easily recognizable for everybody, but is not necessarily very accurate. And that is called the sciatic notch. So this is the sciatic notch. It's toward the side of the pelvis. And in general terms, the more wide that it is, the more sort of U-shaped that it is, the more likely it is to be a female, and the more sort of narrow it is, the more likely it is to be male. Again, this is an easy characteristic to see, but it's not necessarily that accurate. Sciatic notch, wide, is a female characteristic. Okay, next characteristic to talk about is this thing called the sub-pubic angle. So again, as a reminder, the front bone is the pubic bone, right? Or sometimes called the os pubis. And so when we're measuring the sub-pubic angle, what we're measuring is below the pubic symphysis in the front. What is this angle as what's called the Ischiopubic Ramus recedes? When we have just the one bone, we can look at it as what's the angle when we put a finger up to the pubic symphysis. In females, that angle is wider, and in males, that angle is more narrow. When we have both os coxa, it's possible to look at the sub-pubic angle together. And so, again, in this case, the pubic, or the pelvic girdle, the pelvic girdle on your left is the male, and the one on your right is the female. And so hopefully you can see that this looks more like an upside down V at the subpubic angle, and in the female, the subpubic angle is much wider and is a U shape. All right. So for the third one, I will use a characteristic that requires the entire pelvic girdle, and that trait is called the pelvic inlet. And so what we will look at is, what does the opening of the pelvis look like? And hopefully you can see this okay. In the female, that's on your right, it will look in general a little bit more rounded. And in the male, it will look a little bit more sort of like heart-shaped. And the argument that is given for this is, for evolutionarily speaking, that will make it easier for females to be able to give birth to babies with big heads. Okay, so for the pelvic inlet, round is more female as a characteristic. Okay, now related to this subpubic angle, there is, I mentioned the skeletal feature called the Ischiopubic Ramus. And this is that piece of bone that goes underneath the pubic symphysis from the pubic bone into the ischium as a second bone in the pelvic girdle. And so what we will pay attention to on the Ischiopubic Ramus is the shape of the bone. So with the subpubic angle, with the more straight or sort of V-shaped angle, the Ischiopubic Ramus in the male is going to be consistently the same throughout the entirety of the ramus. And that's true regardless of the way in which we look at this part of the pelvis. So, but especially looking at it here, it stays relatively straight. With a female, the Ischiopubic Ramus, because of this more U-shaped angle at the subpubic angle, the Ischiopubic Ramus is quite thin at the top part of the Ischiopubic Ramus, and it has a little bit of a curve to it, of course, and a little bit of a twist. And so in the Ischiopubic Ramus, it's more kind of straight for males, and for females, it gets thin and has a little bit of a twist. Okay, so for the the fifth characteristic is also influenced by the subpubic angle, the Ischiopubic Ramus, and this has to do with this hole in the pelvis. And that hole is called the Obturator Foramen. I will write that down on the board in a moment. So what you'll notice between these two individuals, again, the male is on your right as you're viewing this, and the female is on your left as you're viewing this. The Obturator Foramen is a little bit differently shaped. And again, this has to do with the difference in the subpubic angle. And so in females, the Obturator Foramen usually is more kind of rounded, and in males, it's, let me reverse that, sorry. In the females, it's more often it's described sometimes as D-shaped, sometimes as kind of triangular in the females. And so this has to do with the Ischiopubic Ramus being more thin and more curved. In males, The obturator foramen is more sort of just more classically oval shaped. All right, so let me write that on the board. Oops. Wrong marker. Okay. Okay, so I want to give at least one characteristic and hopefully for each bone in the pelvic girdle. So I'm going to give two for associated with the ilium, the big bone that's on the side of your hips. So the first one has to do with the iliac crest, the shape of the iliac crest. And so at the top part of the pelvis, in males, the iliac crest tends to be more vertical. So the iliac crest is going more upward. And in general, in females, the iliac crest is going a little bit away. Or receding sometimes is the phrase that's used. And so when we look at the pelvic girdle together, sometimes for females, it's described as maybe being a little bit more saddle shaped. And so again, in this one, the female is on your right as you're looking at it, the male is on your left as you're looking at it. And for the female, you can see that the angle, the top part of the iliac crest, is more pointing outwardly, and for males, it's more up. The shape of the pelvic girdle sometimes is described as being sort of saddle-shaped. And in females, that saddle is going to be a little bit more flat, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it, and males a little bit more angled. When I was in graduate school, this difference in shape of iliac crest was described using bowls, but people don't use soup bowls much anymore or cereal bowls. But the more straight angle of the male iliac crest is described more as like a cereal bowl, and for females, with this kind of flared angle coming out a little bit, is more of a soup bowl shaped. Last one for the ilium, and then I'll give characteristics about sacrum. For the ilium, the part of the pelvis that attaches to the sacrum is called the auricular surface, and that's this space right here. And in males, the bone, especially right here at a location called the apex, for males, there is not much difference, if anything, between how high the bone surface is with the auricular surface and the rest of the ilium. In females, there is more of a rise in the auricular surface. And so often this is described as like a mesa, like a flat topped hill, something like this. So again, we can focus in the females, and it can be tough on camera without being able to hold them. What we see is a little bit of a difference in how kind of tall or how separated the auricular surface is to the bone that's surrounding the bone. Okay. Okay. I did not bring a sacrum out, an individual one, so we will use the sacrum that are on this. So there are two main characteristics that we pay attention to with the sacrum. All right, so curvature and shape, as you see the two written on the board. So in males, the sacrum is going to be on average more curved. And so what we will measure is on especially the inside part of the sacrum, we will measure what the curve is going along from the top part of the bone to the bottom part of the bone. In males, it's more curved like so. In females, it's going to be more kind of vertical. All right, and again, this is argued evolutionarily to be associated with an adaptation to giving birth to babies with big heads. The second characteristic that we pay attention to with the sacrum is how long it is compared to how wide it is. And so that's that second part with shape. Males tend to have a longer sacrum compared to how wide it is. Females tend to have a short sacrum compared to how wide it is. And therefore, on average, females' pelvic girdle will be shorter than males. All right, so this is not all of them. There are about 20 or so characteristics that we pay attention to on the pelvis, but these are many of the main ones that we pay attention to.